Hello, I'm Terell Alvin McCraney, and I am this year's chair of the Piano Slam. It is a great honor to be coming to you today from the New World School of the Arts here in downtown Miami, where I'm an alumni. Today we're going to be talking about the presence of now in poetry, in music, and how it comes forward. For me, I grew up in Liberty City, which is about 10 minutes away from here. And everywhere there is music. The street corners, in your house, in your school, on your bus. And that music transformed me, or called to me, to somehow try to put it down on the page. And that's always that hard transition, right? For a poet, for many of us who are poets, trying to find how to get those beats, those arpeggios, those accidental notes, and write them down as words. And so I look a lot to the classics. I go back to, say, the King James Bible. For the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. What does that word mean, green pastures? And why does that elicit such a time of peace and quiet? How do you take a word and put them together and elicit a long passage of field or a sunlight or a beam of moon? And sometimes I go to Shakespeare, whose percussive rhythm reminds me of the heartbeat. How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge. The beats in that language, this shall pass, the length and the color is how I find ways to take something as similar as rap music or samba and allow it to generate life on the page. Now, I know it all sounds like hocus pocus right now. It sounds as if I'm making up some magic trick. But in truth, I'm not. In truth, it is simply listening to any rhythm. The rhythm of the goombay that used to happen in Coconut Grove, where my grandmother is from, or the rhythm of a car radio, the rhythm of a woman who I just passed who asked me for $1. Hey, nephew, what does that sound like? What does that beat? What is her calling across the street mean? And how do I put that down on the page? Modern poets do the same thing. One of my favorite poems from my favorite poet, I found actually in the Miami-Dade Library, which is right down the street. One day I just walked in and I was looking for a poet who happened to speak about the gay black experience. And this poet, Essex Hempfield, wrote a poem called Heavy Breathing. At the end of heavy breathing, at the beginning of grief and terror, on the X2, a bus I like to call a slave ship, the majority of its riders black, pressing to journey northeast into voodoo ghettos, festering on the knuckles of the Negro dream. All of those sounds colluding in his head to make something from a bus ride. I ride the jitney a lot when I'm home, when I'm in Miami. I know some of you don't want to talk about riding the jitney, but I do. And when I'm on the jitney, I hear a myriad of sounds. There are people talking back and forth to each other in languages I don't understand, Spanish, Haitian, Creole. And there's also the music of the bus itself, the roar of the tires, yeah, the screeching of the halts, the whirring in and out of different neighborhoods. And then there is sometimes singing, women humming to themselves, babies crying, the sounds of phones going off. What does that music, that cacophony do to one? How did Essex on his bus, the X2, find a minute to call something heavy breathing? How did he hear heavy breath underneath all of that sound? So my invitation to you, to other writers, to those of you who like writing and poetry, those of you who are musicians and want to find ways to talk in different languages other than music, I invite you to listen to those sounds, all of them, bring them in and find where there's heavy breathing. Find how to speak about that heavy breathing underneath all of that and how to do it right now. This year, the Piano Slam is centered around taking, as it always is, taking a concerto to pianos and making it into, or translating it into, or infusing it with yourself and bringing it to the page. The thought is how to bring that and use these to synthesize that to this. It's not always the easiest of challenges. Sometimes it's getting this to be quiet. The greatest censor we all have is here. Before we even begin to put something down, there are 55 critiques of, no, that's stupid, or no, 5 more of these, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm too smart, or I'm not sexy enough, or I don't have whatever it is that stops us from thinking ourselves brave enough, strong enough to put down truth on the page of what we really take in. And so I invite you to, as Athol Fugard has, as Shakespeare has, as Essex Hemphill has, James Baldwin, Gwendolyn Brooks, Langston Hughes, I invite you to turn that censor off for a moment and allow this to synthesize what this can be, truly, and do it now. There is no time like the present. There's no time like today. I began writing at a very early age. My first play I wrote at 13 years old and entered into the youth fair contest. It wasn't very good. And I don't say that because it had flaws or it needed critique or editing. All plays need editing. All work can constantly be reshaped. We can take a piece of work and mold it for the rest of our lives. I think Picasso spent 20 years on one painting. But something happens, there's a jump when an artist stops trying to duplicate or mimic what they see and starts really putting down what they feel, what they sense, what they navigate towards. The only new thing we can bring to any art form is ourselves. There will never be another us. There will always be another poem. There will always be another song. But there will never be another you writing that poetry or song. And I like to work with numbers and counts and rhythms. What do you work from? What calls to you? It may not be a count. It may be something else. It may be a feeling or an atmosphere. It may be dissonance. It may be an augmented fourth. What does that mean to you, and how do you put that down on the page? And that's where you'll find the jump between duplicating and imitating to originating, to innovation. The first thing I will say to anyone who wants to write is this: you have to read. It's a truth. You've got to read a lot. You've got to take in a lot. I call it nourishment. I call it feeding yourself, overloading your reading sense on just words, words, words. And music. I write to music. I turn on all kinds of music and I just let it play. Are any of you those kinds of people who sit literally at your desk? You sit at your desk and you've got your headphones on and you've got music in the background, you've got the TV and all of these sounds going on, and then of course your parents walk into the room and they go, how are you concentrating like this? How is it possible for you to focus? My dad couldn't understand it. We had the TV on, we had the radio on, we had 4 or 5 things going on outside, there was phones ringing, and that was the best time for me to write. Still today, people don't understand. I will go into the most crowded of Starbucks and sit in a corner and write the best I can all day. If I sit in a quiet room, I'll probably never get anything done, because there's something about the alive world happening, the sound around me, that makes it easier for me to put down work. And that might be true for you. It also may be true, and I have friends like this, who need to go in a dark corner somewhere, shut off all the lights, have their house completely clean and empty in order to put down just one word. And that one word may resonate something later to you. I invite you to do that. But the most important thing is I invite you to investigate. There is no one way of writing anything. And your way will be as idiosyncratic to you as my way is to me. The important thing is that you try, that you look for, that you investigate and figure out what your stance is. Sometimes I literally sit down and look at the page for hours and hours, but I never write anything unless I know the ending of it. Unless I know how it's going to end, I never put anything down, because your hands will get tired. If I sit down and I don't know the ending, I'll write and 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 write, and I'm too lazy for that. I'd much rather play out the circumstances in my mind. And the other thing is your imagination. Oh man, Your imagination is the key, because nothing will scare you like your own imagination. Hold in your hand right now and think of the most frightening thing that you can think of, the thing that is most terrifying to you. Think about it. What is that thing? It is going to be the most terrifying thing to you because only your imagination can summon that. You know your pushing points, your pleasure principle. You know the candy that makes your mouth water. You know the things that make you the happiest. So you have to investigate what those things are, because again, there is no thing more new or interesting than you. Now, that doesn't mean you go around just writing down your daily life. I went to the school today, we ate lunch, and then we came home. Well, everybody does that. But what happened to you specifically? What did you take in that no one else took in that day that's interesting? And I always say start there, because that angle, someone will say, no, I see that. I see you. And when they see you, it'll feel a little embarrassing. It'll feel a little scary. But keep going. When it's a little dangerous like that, that's when you know you're in the right spot. I think something interesting about a Miami artist that no other artist can bank on is the ability to be both culturally expansive but slow in tenor. I think we love light and color and music and festiveness. It's pretty unique. And I think artists around the country are starting to take notice of what Miami artists in Miami-Dade are coming up with. My name is Terell Alvin McCraney. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Miami, Florida, Liberty City. And I graduated from New World School of the Arts in theater. And then I went to DePaul University for acting in Chicago, Illinois. And I graduated in 2003. And then from there, I took a year off and worked with a lot of directors in Chicago, Steppenwolf, North Light, Peter Brook. After that, I went to the Yale School of Drama for 3 years and graduated in the class of 2007 with my MFA from the Yale School of Drama. And then I became writer in residence. Oh, and then I wrote a lot of plays. And there were plays, and I did them all over the place: the Public Theater, Steppenwolf Theater, ACT, Marin Theater, Southern Rep in New Orleans, Gable Stage here in Miami, Alliance Theater, the Royal Shakespeare Company, which I became the writer in residence for 3 years at the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Royal Court. And now I'm here as the chair of the Dranoff Piano Slam in Miami, Florida.